civilly, there is an obligation for state DOJ or someone to represent that person. And clearly when you have a state constitutional officer where the duties of that state constitutional officer are at issue, there is an obligation for DOJ to support and represent that person. Now, there are two times where that may not be true. And the first thing is that if the Attorney General believes that the agency's action or the challenge statute or the challenge behavior or whatever, that they're not doing a duty or whatever, if the Attorney General, State Attorney General, believes that to be unconstitutional, the action to be unconstitutional, and that there is no case that can be made in that person or agency's defense, then he can say, I'm not going to represent the state. Or he can say, I've got a legitimate conflict of interest, which is rare. It doesn't just mean I disagree that Tony Evers isn't providing transportation. It's that the transportation involves my children going back and forth to school or something like that, okay? Anyway, those are the two times when an AG could recuse him or herself. But when that happens, it still gives rise to the duty of the state to provide representation for that person. And so if the AG isn't going to do it, then the state has to provide outside counsel to do it. And that's where the problem comes in. And frankly, that's where the State Journal article fell short. As I indicated to the journalist who wrote the story, I indicated that first part. And while she didn't ask about whether or not there would be an obligation to appoint a representative to represent Mr. Evers and DPI, I actually sent her a follow-up email saying, also, you should know the state would need to appoint an attorney to represent DPI and Tony Evers. But that's, I think, where the disconnect comes in the reporting, and that's where the troublesome aspect of what's happening with Schimmel's recusal comes in. Conservatives know that they now have a Supreme Court that will overturn previous decisions by our state Supreme Court and say that that transportation must be provided, okay? So from that standpoint, if indeed Schimmel believes that, he can say now, well, I think that this is unconstitutional, despite that our state Supreme Court has ruled to the contrary previously, okay? And then he doesn't provide representation, and then the state Supreme Court says, no, you got to provide the transportation, given its current makeup. And then Schimmel can come back and say, hey, I was right, this was unconstitutional, and you do have to provide the transportation. So there's, first of all, there's that tricky little thing, and I don't think that the Attorney General was claiming that he had some sort of conflict of interest. I think they are simply saying that they do not believe that they believe that not providing transportation is unconstitutional, and hence they're no longer going to represent. Even if the AG's office wants to say, hey, we think this is unconstitutional, we can't represent, we're going to withdraw our representation, there's still this duty to appoint. And Walker needs to allocate some funds so that Evers has some counsel.